Section C, row 7, seats 4 through 7. I had sent the maps, the parking info, and the seating charts weeks ago, but as I sat in my graduation gown, waiting to receive my degree, those 4 seats remained empty. My parents weren't stuck in traffic. They weren't late. They were at my brother's local baseball game, because, in their words, he might actually go pro. They didn't realize that while I was sitting in that auditorium, I wasn't just graduating. I was the secret owner of a tech startup worth millions. And in that moment, as the dean called my name, I didn't cry. I just opened my laptop, called my lawyer, and quietly removed them from my $10 million will. They wanted to miss my big day? Fine. Now they'll miss the rest of my life. My name is Josephine. I am 32 years old. I am a licensed architect with a firm in the Pacific Northwest. I design buildings that people will live and work in for decades. I am good at my work, patient with complexity, precise with detail. These are skills I did not learn in school. I learned them long before that, in a household where being overlooked was the condition that required the most careful navigation. My parents are Gerald and Susan Whitfield. Gerald spent 30 years as a high school history teacher before retiring. Susan worked part-time at a dental office for most of my childhood and then stopped working entirely when my brother Connor turned 12 and needed, according to her, more attention at home. Connor is 4 years younger than me. He played baseball from the time he was 7 years old. Little league, travel ball, high school varsity. The kind of progression that happens when a child has talent and parents who treat that talent as the central organizing principle of the entire family. I want to be precise about this because it matters. My parents are not bad people. They are not villains. They are simply people who made choices, over and over again, that revealed a priority they would never have admitted out loud. Connor came first. Not first chronologically. I was born first, but first in the way that counts. First in attention, first in money, first in time, first in the stories they told about themselves as parents. I was the daughter who handled things, the one who made her own lunch and walked home from school and figured out the financial aid application without help, the one who got good grades without tutoring and solved problems without guidance and never required anything that would complicate the schedule of a family built around a boy with a good arm and a powerful swing. I learned early that asking for things I needed was a disruption, that my presence was most welcome when I was invisible, that the highest compliment my parents could give me was that I was easy, low maintenance, independent. They said these things like they were virtues, like they were praising me. I understood later that they were simply describing the shape of my absence. When I was accepted to the architecture program at my university, Gerald said that was great and asked if I had seen Connor's batting average from the weekend tournament. When I graduated high school with honors, Susan took photos and then left early from the ceremony to drive Connor to a travel ball game 2 hours away. When I called home from college on the nights when the work was overwhelming and I was tired and lonely and needed to hear a familiar voice, the conversations lasted 8 minutes and included 4 updates about Connor's season stats. I stopped calling as often, stopped expecting much, learned to calibrate my needs to the amount of attention available for me, which was small and irregular and always contingent on what Connor had going on. I told myself this was fine, that I was building independence, that needing nothing from my parents was a kind of freedom. I was lying to myself, but I was good at it by then. The baseball game that kept my parents from my graduation was a regional qualifier. Connor's college team had made it to the second round of their conference tournament. A Saturday afternoon game, 4 hours from the university where I was receiving my degree. I had known about the conflict for 3 weeks. I had called Gerald the moment I saw the tournament bracket posted online, told him the dates overlapped, asked if they could find a way to make it work. Maybe come to the graduation in the morning and drive to the game in the afternoon. Maybe just come to the graduation. Gerald had been quiet for a moment. Then he said they would figure it out. Susan called the next day, said the drive was too far, that Connor was in the starting rotation and would be devastated if his family was not there, that graduation ceremonies were all the same and I would understand when I had children of my own someday. I said I understood, hung up the phone, sat in my apartment for a long time looking at the architecture thesis framed on my wall, the one I had spent 14 months designing, the project that had earned the highest grade in my cohort, the project my parents had never asked to see. I told them the tickets were already reserved, that the seats were waiting, that all they had to do was show up. They did not show up. When my name was called, I walked across the stage. shook the dean's hand, accepted my diploma, smiled for the staff photographer whose job was to capture the moment for every graduate whether or not anyone was watching. Someone in the audience cheered. A stranger, a family there for someone else who happened to be enthusiastic enough to cheer for everyone. I looked out at the auditorium as I walked back to my seat, at the thousands of faces turned toward the stage. At the section C, row 7, still empty, I sat down, held the diploma in my lap, let the ceremony continue around me. After, I stood on the steps outside in my cap and gown and took a photo of myself with my phone, arm extended, diploma in one hand. The university building behind me, a woman nearby, there for her own daughter, saw me and asked if I would like her to take it. I said yes. She took 3 photos, handed back my phone, congratulated me warmly. I thanked her, meant it. I went to the restaurant alone, the one I had reserved 3 months ago when I first started planning this day. A table for 4, reduced to 1 when I called ahead to adjust the reservation. The waiter was kind, did not ask about the empty chairs, brought me bread and water and the pasta dish I had been thinking about for weeks. I ate it slowly, had a glass of wine, looked out the window at the spring afternoon. When the check came, I paid it, left a good tip, walked back to my apartment. My phone had 2 messages by then. The first was from Susan, sent at 4:17 in the afternoon. A photo, Connor mid-pitch, arm extended, the particular frozen grace of a baseball player at the moment of release. The caption said, "He was incredible. 3 strikeouts in the 7th. So proud. How was your ceremony?" The second was from Gerald, sent 9 minutes later. "How did it go? Sorry we missed it. You know how these things are." I looked at both messages for a long time. You know how these things are. As if missing your daughter's college graduation was a thing that simply happened. A weather event, an inevitability that no one could have prevented. I did not respond that night. Set the phone face down on my desk, took off my cap and gown, hung them in the closet, made tea, and started thinking. My grandmother on my father's side had died 2 years earlier, Eleanor Whitfield, a woman of quiet precision and deep affection, who had been, alongside a handful of close friends, one of the only people in my life who had shown up consistently, who had asked about my work and read the articles I sent her, and driven 3 hours to see a student exhibition of my architecture models when I was in my 2nd year. Eleanor had left me something, not much in absolute terms, a savings account with $42,000, built over decades of careful living, and a piece of guidance, delivered privately in the last coherent conversation we had before her final decline. She had taken my hand and said, "Be careful who you put in your will, Josephine. People show you who they are. Believe them." I had been thinking about that sentence for 2 years, about what it meant to build a future, to make decisions about who belonged in it. I had a will. Everyone should have a will. The estate attorney I had used 3 years earlier had told me. Even young people, even people who did not think they had enough to matter. I had enough to matter. The apartment I owned, the retirement accounts I had been building since my first job, the investments I had made carefully over 5 years, the savings I had accumulated because I had always been low maintenance and independent and had never spent money expecting anyone to supplement it. My parents were listed as primary beneficiaries, as I had always assumed they would be, as felt natural when I was 24 and had not yet spent enough time looking clearly at what my family actually was. I was 28 when I sat at my desk the night after my graduation and opened the contact information for my estate attorney. I sent an email at 11:47 that night, asked for an appointment, said I needed to make some changes to my will. The meeting was the following Wednesday. My attorney was a woman named Patricia Osei, 50 years old, reading glasses on a lanyard, the kind of calm, professional competence that made difficult conversations feel manageable. I sat across from her desk and told her what I wanted. I wanted my parents removed as beneficiaries, completely. I wanted my estate divided as follows: 40% to a scholarship fund at my university, designated for first-generation students in the architecture program, 30% to my closest friend Elena, who had driven 6 hours the previous summer to help me move and had never once asked for anything in return, 20% to the community land trust I had been supporting for 2 years, 10% to a rotating fund I would direct during my lifetime toward causes I cared about. Patricia listened, asked the necessary questions, confirmed that I was making these changes of my own free will, without duress, said she would have the updated documents ready within 2 weeks. She did not ask why I was removing my parents. That was not her job. But as I stood to leave, she looked at me over her glasses with an expression that was professional and also just barely kind. The scholarship fund is a thoughtful choice, she said. First-generation students do not always have people in their corner, I said. I know what that feels like. She nodded, said nothing else. I signed the updated documents the following Thursday, walked out of her office into a May afternoon very similar to the one I had spent alone 2 weeks earlier. I did not tell my parents, did not announce what I had done, did not hint at it in conversation or post about it or find indirect ways to let them know. I simply did it, quietly, completely, and moved forward. My parents called on a Thursday evening, 11 days after graduation. Gerald's voice was normal, routine. He asked about work, about the apartment, whether I was keeping up with the news. I answered the questions, kept my voice even. The same surface conversation we had always had. Near the end, he said, "Sorry again about the graduation. We really wanted to be there." "I know," I said. "Connor's team ended up losing in the 3rd round anyway. These things happen." "Yes," I said. "These things happen." We talked for another 4 minutes. I said goodbye, hung up. He did not know that 12 days earlier I had made a decision that would shape what my life's work ultimately served. That the things I had built with my own hands and my own money and my own unwitnessed effort would go to first-generation students and community land trusts and the friend who had shown up when it counted, not to the people who had stood at a baseball game while I walked across a stage alone. What happened in the years after, I watched from a careful distance. Connor graduated from college and spent 2 years in minor league baseball before an elbow injury ended his career. He moved back to his hometown. Gerald and Susan helped him get settled, paid his rent for a year while he figured out what came next. The pattern that had always existed continued without disruption. I was invited to family gatherings, Christmas, Thanksgiving, the occasional birthday dinner. I attended some and skipped others with equal amounts of guilt-free calculation. I showed up when I chose to, left when I wanted to, contributed to conversations without requiring anything emotional in return. I had stopped expecting emotional return. That made everything simpler. The architecture firm promoted me to project lead 3 years after graduation. I managed a team of 6, designed a community center that won a regional award, was quoted in an industry publication, was invited to speak at a university symposium on sustainable urban design. I sent Gerald and Susan the article. Patricia replied that it was lovely. Gerald said he had always known I would do well. He had not always known that. He had barely known anything about what I was doing for the first 8 years of my career, but I did not correct him. Let the revision stand. When I was 30, Susan mentioned casually in a phone call about something else that they had updated their own will, that they wanted me to know I was included, that they hoped that was reassuring. I said thank you, moved the conversation forward. Did not tell her what I had done 2 years before graduation. Did not tell her that whether I was in their will was a matter of complete indifference to me. I had stopped building my life around what my parents would eventually leave me before I was old enough to understand that was what I was doing. I was 32 now. The apartment was mine. The career was mine. The decision I had made quietly at a desk on a May evening 2 weeks after walking across a stage alone was mine. The scholarship fund at my university had already received its first contribution. I made annual donations directly, in addition to whatever would come later. 2 students had received support in the program's first year. Students who were the first in their families to attend university. Students who were doing the work without a clear path and without guaranteed support. I knew what that was like. I did not know their names, did not want to. This was not about receiving gratitude. It was about directing resources toward people who would use them the way I had used every resource I had ever found on my own. Well, carefully, with full understanding of what it had cost to get there. My father had said these things happen. He had meant it as an explanation, as a reasonable account of why a man and a woman had not driven to their daughter's graduation. He was right. These things happen. Parents make choices that reveal their priorities. Children watch those choices accumulate for decades. And eventually, when the child has built something of her own, she makes choices too, quietly, completely, without announcement. These things happen. Here is what I want to know. If your parents missed your college graduation to watch your siblings' sports game, would you have quietly changed your will the way I did? Or would you have confronted them directly and demanded they acknowledge what they had done? Some people say you should always tell family when they have hurt you and give them the chance to make it right. Others say that some patterns are so long and so clear that explanation would change nothing. Do you think I was wrong to stay silent and act quietly instead of having an honest conversation? And the question I think about most, if your parents eventually found out what you had done, would you want them to know why? Or would you prefer they never fully understood? Tell me your honest answer in the comments. If you believe people should face the consequences of their actions, hit subscribe. I have got more stories of justice that will blow your mind.